Okay, thank you everyone for attending our webinar today, September 30th, Tuesday, September 30th. We are this puts us what? July, August, September, 3 months out from our 2025 KdVS Patient and Scientific Summit. And I'm Anna Falzer, which hopefully isn't too much of an introduction to most of you listening. And I'm joined here today by our amazing research coordinator, Megan Hutchinson, whom many of you might be meeting for the first or second time. Actually, no, most of them will have met you at the summit, so that's crazy. So Megan and I both thought that it would be really cool to start showing some of the data that we collected while we were at the Patient and Scientific Summit. And so that's what we will sort of go over today, provide an overview of why we did what we did, and then show you some of the preliminary findings that we have found so far. And then also encourage and tell those of you who are watching, listening, or otherwise got their hands on these slides, how to sign up and participate. Okay, so I'm just going to double check and make sure that I actually am recording. Okay, looks like I am. Perfect. All right, so just like I said, we will go over what the drug development process really looks like for a rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorder such as Koolen-de syndrome. We'll go over what a natural history study is and why it's important. I should also say, I wonder if if people have questions, I would love to make this as informal as possible so people can either raise their hand and ask and stop in the middle instead of us just talking the whole way through. I would love for this to be informative, but also helpful in terms of answering your questions or providing, really helpful insights along the way. So you don't have to save your questions for the end. Feel free to interrupt both myself and Megan. And then Megan has been doing a ton of work digging into some of the findings and data that we've collected from all of you guys while we were at the summit, as well as a little bit before. So we're going to touch on, believe it or not, what she's going to show today is just like the tip of the iceberg for what we have found and can find and sort of glean from the work that we collected while we were at the summit. How to get involved in the natural history study and all of the work that the foundation is doing, and then future webinars who will present more aspects of the natural history study.
What about coffee?
Okay, so I think this is a slide that I quite literally show probably every single time I talk about natural history studies or some aspect of the drug development pipeline for rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorders. So I won't go into every single part of this in great detail, but you can appreciate if you can see my cursor. Megan, can you see my mouse cursor? Okay, cool, thank you. If you can look on the left-hand side of this slide, you see you start in the drug development process by identifying the gene that causes sort of the clinical symptoms that you're observing in a population. And then the next part is you have to develop both rodent, or various in vivo or living animal models, as well as cell models of the disorder, because as you can imagine, you can't really test compounds and test things in the brain of humans. And so you have to come up with basic research models to really interrogate and investigate the pathogenic consequence of these genetic mutations. And then one of the other really critical parts of the drug development process is natural history data collection. Now, what is natural history for a disorder? And basically what that is it is observational studies across ages or the timeline of a particular disorder to really capture the symptoms or the other manifestations of the disorder that are present at particular time points across the progression or the duration of the disease. Now, one of the reasons that this is really, really important, I'll name two, but there are definitely more than this. One is that when you get towards clinical trials for a particular disorder, it is really important to find symptoms that are relevant for the age that are going to be eligible for that clinical trial. Meaning that if you have a clinical trial that focuses on infants or toddlers and behavioral symptoms aren't really a problem at that age for that particular disorder, it's not appropriate or not smart to make behavioral changes and symptoms the main readout for whether your clinical trial succeeds or fails. And then the other really amazing thing about a natural history study is that if you know the symptoms and how the disease progresses with time or changes with time, then at a certain point, you don't need placebo study arms when you have a clinical intervention for that particular disorder. And we see this happening for other rare diseases that have a really robust natural history study. So this is really the ideal. And this requires longitudinal data collection for several years amongst the broadest clinical presentation for a particular disorder. Okay, so then the only other part of this paradigm or the schematic that I'll talk about right now is if you move a little bit further to the right, you see that one other really critical component of drug development is the identification of biomarkers for a particular disorder. Now, biomarkers, as the image suggests, is not just blood, vials of blood, but what they are objective measures that you can measure in the blood, for example, or other biofluids, or even physiologic measures like things like how your brain responds to certain stimuli. And those types of biomarkers are things that you guys are probably very familiar with, like electroencephalograms or EEGs. These things are really important in addition to natural history study because they are objective indicators of whether a certain treatment or intervention is actually being effective or not, or improving or not, or worsening, for example. And then as you get all the way to the right-hand side, you see that you have patient-centered outcome measures, so outcome measures that are clinically meaningful to the particular population, and then clinical trials and FDA-approved medications for Koolen-de syndrome. Okay, so one of the biggest challenges for trying to figure out what aspects of disease to investigate really comes from the community. So this is one of the main reasons why a natural history study is important, and also studies like a disease concept model, which Koolen-de Syndrome Foundation is doing right now, is because it provides, these types of studies provide an unbiased view of what types of symptoms are being reported in the Koolen-de community is in children of a variety of different ages and a variety of different genetic mutations, as well as a variety of different clinical presentations. So we know that for individuals who have neurodevelopmental disorders, and everyone listening on this call knows this very well, in addition, is that even though it is a neurodevelopmental disorder, other organ systems besides the central nervous system are very heavily impacted. So in addition to various clinical issues associated with impairments in the nervous system, as many of you know, there are a variety of different congenital cardiovascular abnormalities that are very commonly observed in KdVS. Musculoskeletal problems, lots of orthopedic issues have been reported in KdVS. GI, endocrine, immune systems, recurrent infections, immune system, and the role of Cancer in the immune system has been something that has more recently been studied and is currently being investigated by Dr. Koolen and Dr. DeVries. Urinary issues, issues with the skin, as well as issues with the respiratory system. So because a study like this really hasn't formally been done in a structured way with particular outcome measures or assessments being completed, we really wanted to know from the KdVS community, especially for families and caregivers, to tell us what are the most burdensome symptoms in your child, toddler, young adult with Koolen-de syndrome. So we actually did an online survey at our 2023 summit, where it had a variety of different questions about the caregiver, questions about symptoms in the KdVS individual, but ultimately the most important question was, it asked caregivers, if you had a pill that could treat a symptom, so the most burdensome, most impactful symptom, what would it treat? And so if you can look at this figure on the right-hand side here, again, we had 100 caregivers complete this survey. You can see on the x-axis here, we have responses categorized by the KdVS individual's age. So individuals 0 to 5, 6 to 12, 13 to 21, and over 21. And then the y-axis right here is the percent of respondents within that category. You can see that for individuals who are between 0 and 12, the really most top symptom priority to be improved is communication skills, and then neurological. Now, interestingly, when you look at individuals who are older, communication isn't even a percentage of the response for caregivers. In fact, cognition and improvements in cognition are really the top priority. And then you also see sort of behavioral and emotional issues that seem to be a higher priority in 13-year-olds and older in KdVS. So this really gives us an idea of what types of symptoms that we really need to be focusing on, what types of surveys to capture symptom severity, to really make sure that we include in the natural history study assessments. So now I'm going to walk through, these are the types of surveys that we have on our KdVS data collection platform. It's called the Matrix, in case you have heard people throwing that term around. There are a wide battery of assessments on the platform, and you can see sort of the reason for that is because we're not quite sure which symptoms are going to be the most prevalent in which types of KdVS populations. So we have the developmental history, which asks about all of these different organ or system issues. We have a couple surveys of global neurodevelopment, so the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scale, which I'm sure most of you have taken and are very familiar with. Although the survey, the title says adaptive behavior, this has been used canonically as a general indicator for neurodevelopmental status for many, many years. And then we also have the CDC milestone survey. So at what age does your child hit certain developmental milestones as a way to determine if they are hitting milestones age appropriately or delayed. Epilepsy surveys, diet, communication surveys. This is a really important one for the KdVS population, as we just showed you, that measuring changes in communication skills were a top priority for the community. Behavioral assays that will capture some of these maladaptive behaviors that individuals have developed in other neuropsychiatric issues, and sleep surveys. So We have Megan, myself, Ashley, and others on the research committee at the foundation have designed a sort of uh, multi-layered natural history study that includes online assessments that can be completed at your own time on that matrix portal, um, in-person assessments for those who are able to make our biannual KdVS patient summits, and then a handful of remote assessments as well. Hold on, there's something that just put something in the chat. Oh, thank you. Okay, does someone have a question? Or I don't think so. I think Mary Beth was just talking. Okay. So the online surveys that we are really encouraging families to prioritize. I know there are many more from this, but we will work with you and Megan to really, hopefully really clearly point out the ones that we really, really would love for you to complete. And those are the health and development surveys to get a really thorough snapshot of those other organ systems that are impacted during development in your child or young adult, the Vineland, the aberrant behavior checklist, as well as that communication survey, the ORCA for short. One thing to reiterate is that many of these, so not just these online surveys, but many of the in-person and remote assessments should be completed annually. And we know that's not, surveys are no one's favorite thing to complete, but as I said towards the beginning, understanding how symptoms change with age is a really, really critical part of establishing a natural history study. How do things change with age? And so because of that, we ask for many of these surveys to complete it on an annual basis. And we will help send out reminders to encourage you guys to complete those select surveys. Okay, so here is a really amazing snapshot for the types of research assessments that we completed at the summit. I'm going to say we, but really this work was almost entirely done by Megan, who was running around probably for 24 hours a day for the entirety of the summit to make sure that we really capitalized off of everybody at the KdVS community while we were there and had a lot of research opportunities available to us. So the current enrollment for our natural history study is 95 individuals. 60 of those are individuals with KdVS. 35 are either parents or siblings. And you might be asking, why is it important to have people who are not affected with KdVS involved in a natural history study? And I'm happy to go into that a little bit later. Among these 70, or sorry, that number is not 70, that number is 60. Among the individuals with KdVS that we have enrolled thus far, we have 54 completed the health and development survey, 40 completed the aberrant behavior checklist, 35 have completed the ORCA, and 25 have completed the Vineland. We also had 39 patients have a really comprehensive neuropsychological battery completed. And this was done with the collaboration of a couple investigators at UCSF, including Summer Bishop and her team. They completed the Wexler series on 39 patients, and we will have more data to show at a future webinar on some of the findings from this. We also collaborated with Niccolo Pini out of Columbia University, who completed 52 EEGs on participants while at the summit. He will be joining at a future webinar as well to show some of the interesting preliminary findings that he has found from patients from this work. We also collected 39 patient samples and 3 controls for the biorepository at the summit as well. This was really incredible because a large number of these were actually participants that donated in 2023 when we had our patient summit in Orlando. So we already are set up really nicely to have longitudinal blood collections to look for blood-based biomarkers in KdVS. We have several investigators who are actually actively looking at and using these samples already. The other thing that we collected while at the summit were nitric oxide samples. So many of you might remember me or somebody else sticking a probe at the tip of your nose to measure nasal nitric oxide production. The reason for that is not just because we want to give you PTSD from COVID testing. It was because we think that nitric oxide, nasal nitric oxide production, might be a biomarker for some of the molecular impairments that are occurring as a result of CANSL1 haploinsufficiency. So this is another potential biomarker assay. And then so this last thing that we have completed thus far, this is one of the remote assessments. This is in collaboration with Ken Myers and Emily Batone at McGill University. And they have drafted a clinical global impression scale for KdVS. And they are piloting out this program. They have already enrolled and collected data from 20 patients. They are looking at that right now. We will have them present some of their really cool preliminary findings from this study at a future webinar as well. Okay. My throat is dry from talking the whole time. Okay, Megan, is this where you take over?
This is where
Amazing. Okay, so Megan, so I just talked and explained everything, but Megan's actually going to show you some of the cool data that we've collected from you guys already. Okay, Megan, I'll mute myself.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us today. I also want to reiterate how grateful we are to our families for all that you've done to participate in this study. We understand that this takes a lot of time. You had to take out time away from enjoying the activities at the summit. That requires a lot of sacrifice, and we really appreciate that. I know that like Hannah said, I was running around. I met many of you there and was very excited to interact with everybody and meet your kiddos. It was a great experience. And so we've collected so much from that. And now we're starting to do the initial data analysis. So this is all preliminary findings. And as Anna said, this doesn't even scratch the surface of what we've collected so far. The amount of buy-in from this community to participate in the online surveys is unparalleled. I've never seen another group of people so motivated to answer questions about your kids and to be open to research and want to participate. So we greatly appreciate that. And I also put the link in the chat if there's anybody joining us who hasn't yet signed up for the study and is interested in signing up. So you can click that link to go to Matrix. And if you have any additional questions, I will help you with that as well. Just going over the health and development survey here. So when we initially onboard new people into the Matrix, one of the first surveys that you're going to complete is the health and development survey. And so this survey essentially asks a lot of different questions about whether or not you have experienced some changes related to issues with labor and delivery, for example. So that's what we see in this first column. Anna, do you see a bunch of check boxes? Why are there so many checks?
I don't know. That's a fun thing. I do see check boxes, but those don't mean anything, do they?
Nope. I don't know where they came from, but now we have lots of checks. But
okay.
Oh, you're
sorry. I don't know what happened. What? It must have. Hold on. I was trying to fix your Okay, hold on. Whoop. Oh, there. Sorry. Just make sure you're awake.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so with that, so some of the questions it asks, for example, if there's changes in labor and delivery, if you had any issues with growth. So as your child is aging, do you see that there's any changes in growth, whether that be slower, faster? Those are some of the things that are captured there. If you have any issues with the endocrine system, so that could be things like diabetes or just changes in hormone levels that you've noticed, brain and nervous system. So any changes related to maybe something you might have seen in an EEG or an MRI, behavioral and psychological changes. So those are, some of the things we've already captured where we talked a little bit about mood and behavior. So those are also some of the questions reflected there, changes in the heart and blood vessels, lungs and breathing and immune system. And as we can see here that it's about 50-50 for a lot of the different systems. So whether or not there were changes experienced in pregnancy, so that could have been maybe a premature birth or any kind of complication with mom during the delivery. So we see that roughly about half said yes and half said no.
So
Same for
blue is yes, right?
blue is yes, orange is no, and green is unsure. So
Okay, got it.
there's 3
Mhm,
options for this
mhm.
survey, and again, there's more features besides just these different systems that are listed here. But for, growth, we can see that many patients do experience, changes in growth, whether that be slow growth, or precocious growth. Unfortunately, this survey doesn't really break that down too much, but we have other surveys of development that we're gonna look into a little more to see what those changes look like. And then for the endocrine system, we can see not many people have any issues with endocrine system. So that's one area that's less affected in KdVS, whereas brain and nervous system, the vast majority of folks did say that they did have changes in the brain and nervous system. For behavior and psychology, we see that it's roughly about half there. With a little less said no, with the majority saying yes. Same for heart and blood vessels, roughly about half. Lungs and breathing, still majority no, but a large proportion of individuals did identify that there are changes in the respiratory system. And then for the immune system, this is one area that other researchers are actively looking into for KdVS. So we can see here that there's a proportion that said yes and some that said no. So I think that there's a lot of underlying information that we can garner from that. Some of the other systems that are captured within this survey include things like changes with cancer, vision, ear, nose, and throat, which that was a big one. I didn't include it in this chart because it was starting to get busy, but ear, nose, and throat, that was a super common one. We had over 28 respondents say that that was an issue that their child experienced. Changes in skin, muscles, things of that nature. So lots of different information is captured there. For muscles, that was another one that was pretty large. About 31 individuals said that that was a challenge that they faced. So I think from the health and development survey, we can get a better picture of what some of these systems are going to be priorities for families, like from that initial survey that Anna was talking about earlier. Anna, if you can advance us. Perfect. So now we'll talk a little bit about the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scale. So these are standardized assessment tools. Anna briefly introduced those. So essentially they're measuring developmental delays. They're often used in autism spectrum disorder, intellectual disability, as well as other developmental and psychological conditions. So they're used for a variety of different things. And there are some different scores that we get from the Vineland. So for those of you that have participated in the Vineland so far, thank you so much. It is a very time consuming scale, and we understand that and recognize that sacrifice that you're making to go through and answer those questions. So, thank you again for the families that have completed it so far. And for those of you that are already enrolled and haven't yet completed it, I encourage you to complete the Vineland because we think this is going to reveal a lot of interesting information, which it already has. So, here we can see that we have the communication standard score. So the Vineland has some domain scores, which are basically domains of adaptive behavior. So communication can be broken down into different things, such as receptive communication, expressive, written communication, daily living skills. So that's another domain. So that can be personal. So, things like grooming, things like that. Domestic. So being able to do chores around the house or, community daily living skills as well. And so some of those are reflected there. And then we also have a socialization standard score. So this is looking at interpersonal relationships, how your child plays with other people, how they spend their leisure time, and any coping skills are also captured in that. And then the composite score, the adaptive behavior composite score, this is kind of an overall score that summarizes the individual's level of adaptive functioning. And so the standard score for all of these, the mean is set around 100. And we can see here that for the average score for patients with KdVS, so this only included, I think it was 25 so far that have completed the Vineland, but we can see that the average score for communication is around 60 for that domain, so 60.72. So that reflects that patients are having some challenges with language. For daily living skills, that was around 63.96. So that's reflecting that there are some challenges related to daily living. And then for socialization, we can see that there are challenges with social behaviors, that's around 65. And for the adaptive behavior overall, it is a little bit higher, but it's still reflecting that it is below that mean of 100. So essentially, what this is telling us is that there might be some mild delays and there are challenges in different areas for patients with KdVS. And so this is really valuable information for us because the Vineland is often used in clinical trials to see if there are improvements in these measures with different treatments. So the better idea we can get of a baseline across patients and then also be able to compare that over time, the more helpful it is for us at moving forward. Perfect. So now I'll spend a little bit of time to talk about the Orca. So this is a really interesting new developing score that is being used. It was developed at Duke, and so the initial cohort was, I think it was roughly 250 caregivers that participated in the reference cohort. And so there are different concepts that are covered in this communication scale. So Anna talked about how a lot of our families said that communication is their top priority. So there are different areas of communication that we want to assess and to better understand what the baseline level is and if there's ways that we can improve some of the subtleties of that. So if we think about expressive communication, this is when an individual is seeking attention or directing attention. So this could be in the form of a conversation, saying, "Hey, look at me," or trying to direct someone to direct attention to something else. And then this also can be with object direction. So refusing to eat a type of food or asking for a certain type of food or a toy or something of that nature. Requesting an object out of view. So that would be another example where if something's in another room and they're asking for that item, an iPad, for example. Asking questions, that's another form of expressive communication. And then kind of like narrative storytelling about the past. So being able to reflect and recall on that, that's another form of expressive communication. So these are some of the different areas that the ORC is assessing. It also assesses receptive communication. So that's being able to respond to someone's name, understanding some of the characteristics of someone's mood. So if mom and dad aren't happy with somebody, that would be, trying to pick up on those social cues. And then understanding, making choices, following directions, things like that. That's more receptive communication. Whereas pragmatic communication is being able to comfort other people, greeting people, and playing games with other people. So those are kind of the concepts that are built into the Orca. And I'll talk a little bit about the scores that we got. If you want to advance, Anna, thank you. So with the Orca, really interestingly, the mean of the Orca is built around 50. So we can see here that patients with KdVS are scoring above average in pretty much all of these areas, which is really interesting. So we can see that for overall, the overall Orca score is elevated. So we see that at 67.48. I believe the standard deviation, the range rather for the Orca scores go for overall anywhere from 25 to 83.8. These are built in what's called a T-score. So that's just how these are calibrated. And so we can see that patients with KdVS, they're scoring above the mean of 50, but slightly below the max. And so this is really interesting for us. Also with the expressive language. So some of those different features we were just talking about, we can see that one, the range is anywhere from 34.6 to 75.9. And we can see here that patients with KdVS also still around the 60s. So we have 66.71, still above the average there. And that is also true for receptive and pragmatic communication. So I think that this scale is going to be really interesting for us to get some more granular data from patients with KdVS to be able to understand how we can use this information and how patients are communicating. Because I feel like a lot of families observe this, that your kids are very social and they want to interact with other people. And I got to see that firsthand at the summit, which was so exciting and encouraging to meet with all of them and listen to them and see them play and interact with other people. So I think that's one of the benefits of this scale is it really kind of helps us compare to other neurodevelopmental groups as well, because the Orca is being piloted across several neurodevelopmental disorders, and we're trying to get an understanding of how that scale compares across different groups. And so for us, we might be for KdVS, we might be on the higher end of where things are for the Orca, which is really interesting. And really the importance of this scale also helps us to prevent bottoming out. Whereas on a lot of other scales for rare neurodevelopmental disorders, a lot of patients, they end up being towards the lower end of the score and you don't really get an understanding of what people are able to do. Whereas the Orca is a little more in depth where we can kind of understand those interactions a little better from social communication. So That's what we've learned so far. Anna, if you want to advance. So, with that being said, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our community and where we're located and how we're growing, and how a lot of those numbers that we were talking about at the beginning, where we had 60 patients that are currently enrolled in the natural history study, they are not yet reflected in what we have here. So this is our patient registry community information. So you can see we have lots of families located all over the US, with some of these central areas where we know that there are lots of academic medical centers and lots of resources for families, where we have higher populations of individuals living. So it's pretty amazing to be able to visualize that we are covering the vast majority of the US and all around the world. So, Anna, if you want to advance, and I'll talk a little bit about this. So, you can see here that we have, over 276 families in the US. We have 22 families in Canada, big centers in Australia, Europe, Brazil. So we have lots of people all over in every continent except Antarctica. So I think with that being said, there's lots of opportunities for families to engage and to participate in the natural history study moving forward. Even if you're not located in the US and don't think that you would be able to participate in some of the in-person assessments and things like that, we encourage families that are located elsewhere to participate. It's a great opportunity for us to learn about the disorder from your family's perspective, where you're located, what your health system's like,
Mhm.
and that can help us with deciding clinical trial sites moving forward. So we need to know where our community is and be able to refine the natural history study data that we have, to be able to meet your needs as well. So we definitely encourage everybody abroad to participate. And it's amazing the way that this community has grown. I admire all of the hard work of the foundation for what they've developed with this patient registry. And we hope to only grow that with the natural history study and potentially be able to match those numbers and have people enrolled in all the different aspects of the study that they can participate in, because your information is really valuable, not only to researchers, but also to biotech and pharma companies who are interested in, pursuing treatments, developing treatments for KdVS. And so that's what we hope to bring to you through all of this work. And if you would like to sign up, please feel free to email
Mm.
me. Many families have, oh no, did it get blocked? So if you have already signed up, I do ask that you would complete the surveys. So there are lots of different surveys that we talked about today. Those would be in your patient portal if you've already developed one. If you haven't, feel free to email me. We can work together. I know a lot of families, this platform unfortunately is a little bit tricky, and so signing up can be a little frustrating for families. I am so grateful to all of the folks that met with me multiple times because we had technical difficulties and it wouldn't work out. So I really want to reiterate that if you have any challenges or just have questions and want to know more, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to assist you. We can set up a quick Zoom call and go through the informed consent process together, make sure we get all of your questions answered. And again, for those who have already signed up, please do complete your surveys and participate, because the more data that we have, the better, the more that we can understand about KdVS.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I think this just reiterates. I think there's a couple of things based upon the questions that we've had in the chat, which I will just say. Um, yes, there are lots of surveys. No, you are not limited to participation for people in the United States. Anyone globally can sign up and complete the online research assessments that we just described. And I think those in the long term, if they are completed annually, will end up being the most helpful and informative in terms of establishing which the bulk of the natural history study, as well as establishing which outcome measures and symptoms we'll pick for clinical trials. So please, even if you live outside the US, please please consider participating in this study. And the other really important thing is that Matrix, this data collection platform that we use, is in a variety of different languages. It's in Spanish and Italian, German, Russian, maybe even Czech, Polish, French. I mean, so you should be able to read, and most surveys will be translated as well. If you have any questions about participating, you are welcome to contact Megan, whose email was on the slide before, or Ashley, who's the president of the foundation, or myself. Okay, so Megan just presented just a tiny touch of what we have collected from our natural history data. So our future webinars, which I think we'll schedule, we're going to try and do them monthly again. We will have Dr. Pini. He is the one who collected the EGs. We will have him present next. And then hopefully right before the end of the year, we will have Dr. Baton and possibly Dr. Myers present some of their initial findings on developing the clinical global impression scale for KdVS. Okay, so that's my email address again. And okay, that is all that we wanted to show everyone today. So nobody asked, well, one person had a question in the chat, which I answered, but please, if you have questions, concerns, positive feedback, negative feedback, etc., things to improve, things to ask, etc., please feel free to ask them now. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody. Don't see any, hold on, let me look at the chat. Okay.
I did just want to say there's so many folks on this call that I have spoken to, and I just really want to thank you again. This is a lot of work, and we recognize that and know that, and it's amazing in how short a time that we have accomplished what we've accomplished together. I know that there were so many tired folks after neuropsych and EEGs and donating blood at the summit that and and coming back and completing these surveys at home, like we recognize the effort that you've put in and are so appreciative and can't wait to see what else we're going to learn. So like Anna said, this is just scratching the surface, so we have so much more to come. So thank you again, everyone.
Hey.
I was gonna ask something or just comment.
Yeah.
This is Ann Sandberg, Joe's mom. Joe's
Yay.
mom.
Hi, Ann.
He misses you. He misses you, Megan. We look at the
Oh.
picture that we took all the time. Anyways, but so yeah, someone commented there's a lot of surveys. Holy moly, there's a lot. But I want to just comment. So like, Joe's also part of the Spark for autism studies trial and collection data and all that stuff. And it's tough because like it's almost identical the amount of surveys I'm doing, and I'm having to fill them out twice.
So, are you filling out surveys?
Is there any way that this could be like transferred or
Yes. So what platform are you completing survey? Like what are the surveys that you are completing that you've already done on a different platform? And what was that platform?
So I don't know. It's Spark is somehow connected to the Simons Searchlight, I
Okay.
think.
Okay, so that's fantastic. So one thing that we should reiterate is that if you have completed surveys on RareX or Simon's Searchlight, we can share information with each other as long as you enter Joe's CRID
Oh, okay.
CRID
when
into your RareX or Simon's account, in which case we can ask them for that information. We have a data sharing agreement exactly for the purpose that you just brought up, is like people being annoyed at filling out the same stuff over and over again. And the same is true for us. If you've completed a survey for Megan and Simon's is asking you for it, or RareX is asking you for it now, let her know. And then we can share it with a different platform. The other really big thing to keep in mind is that as more researchers, clinical researchers, enter the KdVS space, if any of them ask for the same assessments, if you log into your Matrix account, you should be able to download and export the vast majority of the assessments that you complete, so you don't have to repeat it again.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So
Okay, yeah. So I think when we started with Spark, he didn't have a CRID, so maybe that's something I have to kind of go back and look into
yeah,
entering it.
it is not intuitive for where it is. Like there's a little bit of digging. So we might have to set up a Zoom, a one-on-one with you to figure out where it is, because it's sort of like you have to click and then click again and find another box and enter it. So it's not intuitive.
Okay.
But I'm happy to help you because I don't want you to have to fill out the same thing multiple times. I hear that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm accumulating all these little Amazon cards. Or credit because of all of this. And I'm like, no, I'd rather just not have to do it. So okay, I'll
Yeah.
reach out. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, and Jan. Oh, Jan said they didn't make the summit. My child is 25. Perfect. Yes, we really need adults to participate as well. There's considerably less known about adults with KdVS. So your participation is particularly important. All right, cool. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, okay. Thank you all for being here. This was great. I'm so impressed with this turnout. Thank you so much. And next time we'll have even more data to show. And I hope it's helpful. All right.